In this video, you'll learn how to manage users and their permissions. The permission options available for your users are based on the permissions enabled for your company. While this video focuses on setting up a new user and the steps to establish their permissions, you'll use the same steps to manage and modify their permissions going forward. Navigate to the User Maintenance workspace from the Administration and Settings menu. Here, you'll see all of your company's users. To add a new user and set their permissions, select Add New User. The recommended process to follow when setting up a new user is at the top of the screen. First, we'll set up the user's profile or define the user. Next, we'll set the new user's permissions within the application. Then, we'll assign the accounts the user can access. We'll finish the user setup by applying any transaction limits for wires, ACHs, and account transfers for the user. The first step to adding a new user is to define the user. Think of this as building the user's profile. Create a user ID. We've found best practice is to establish rules for user ID creation, such as the first letter of the user's first name plus the user's last name. The system does not allow duplicate IDs and will alert you if it identifies a duplicate. The duplicate can be changed by something simple like adding a number to the end of the ID. Enter the username and email address. Information that doesn't have a red asterisk is optional. The system defaults to the U.S. Eastern Time Zone. You can change this to the user's local time zone if it's different. Password is not necessary at this stage due to additional enrollment steps the user will take upon receipt of their registration email. Select any admin settings that apply. Check the Mobile User box if you want the user to be able to access the mobile application. The Copy an Existing User's Permission feature allows you to copy or clone an existing user. Just click in the Existing User box and select the user you want to copy. You can modify the new user's permissions as necessary. Now that all of the user information has been entered, click the Continue button to save your selections and move to the next step. You must entitle the user with at least one permission before you can add or save the user. The Set Permissions screen will display with several tabs across the top of the screen. Each tab contains permissions for that area of the system. If a tab doesn't appear, your company isn't enabled to use that particular system functionality. For payments, use the Select Payment Types section to select which payment types the user has permissions for. You can select all payment types for all payment groups, or select all payment types for each payment group. For example, all wire types or all ACH types. Below, in the Assign Payment Permissions section, you'll assign the specific payment permissions that the user will be able to perform, as well as assign how many approvals are needed. You may assign these permissions in two different ways: by each payment group, the broader payment categories of wires, transfers, loans, and ACH, or by each payment type, the narrower payment categories within each payment group, like domestic wire, international wire, or ACH for payroll. When you select by each payment group, the payment permissions you assign apply to all payment types within that group. When you select by each payment type, you can narrow the user's permissions to the specific type. For example, you may want a user to only be able to view free-form domestic wire payments. You can require the user to select beneficiaries from the contact center for payments, templates, or both. Once you've assigned all the payment permissions for the first payment type, perform the same actions for the remaining payment types. Now that you've assigned all the payment type and payment permissions, on the top tab, click the Next function, which in our case is Reporting. Select all of the reporting permissions appropriate for this user. We're going to give this user access to all balance and transactions and check inquiry reports. Use Risk Management to enable this user to check services and positive pay processing. You may want a user to be able to perform certain administrator tasks in the system, such as access and manage the beneficiary address book for the contact center. Here, you can give the user access to specific alerts. The user will then be able to set up the alert themselves. At this point, you can either click the Add User button to save your changes and return to the User Maintenance page, click Back to return to the Define User process, or click Cancel to clear all of your selections and return to the user maintenance page. For our example, we will click Continue to assign the user's account permissions. In the Assign Accounts section, you can assign the user access to accounts for payment initiation, reporting, and more. There's a lot of flexibility in assigning accounts. You can assign all permissions to all accounts with just one checkbox, or be very granular and select a specific function for a specific account. Along the top are the Apply All Current and Future Accounts checkboxes. By checking the first All checkbox, you assign the user all of the permissions for all current existing accounts, as well as any accounts that are added in the future. You also can select all current and future accounts for each category below the appropriate checkbox. The next level of permissions assigns all existing accounts to each function. Or you can assign all accounts by category within a function. Or you can select all functions for an individual account. You can also limit a user to very specific permissions for individual accounts. Let's give this user all permissions to all current and future accounts. Assign the accounts for each of the remaining tabs. Now that you've assigned accounts to the user, you can either click the Add User button to save your changes and return to the user maintenance page, click Back to return to the Set Permissions process, or click Cancel to clear all of your selections and return to the user maintenance page. For our example, we'll choose Continue. The last step is to apply approval limits for any payment types the user may be entitled to approve. This could apply to entries from another user or their own payments if they're entitled to the Approve Own feature. Applying limits is optional. If no limits are set for the user, the most any user can approve is the limit set at the company or account level. Limits can be set by transaction type and for individual transactions, or by an aggregate daily amount, or both. Limits can be used using overall approval limits, which applies across all accounts. Using account approval limits assigns the user's limits by account. On the Overall Approval Limits tab, for each payment type, enter the transaction limit and daily limit. Using the Quickly Apply Limits boxes allows you to enter an amount for transaction or daily limits and apply it to all payment types on screen. Add the approval limits for each of the payment groups and enter as necessary for each payment type. Now that this user is fully permissioned, click on the Add User button to create the user. You will return to the User Maintenance widget and see a confirmation message that the user was successfully created. You will see the new user in the list view. The new user will appear in either Entered or Approved status. If the status is Entered, you or another administrator, depending on permissions, will need to approve the user before they can log into the system. To approve a user, select Approve from the Actions menu. You can also approve several users at once by selecting the checkbox in front of the users you wish to approve and clicking the Approve button at the bottom of the User Maintenance widget. To modify a user, select Modify from the Actions menu. Make the desired changes to the user and select Update. Upon successful submission, you'll return to the User Maintenance widget, where you'll see the modified user with the appropriate status. To delete a user, select Delete from the Actions menu for the user you wish to remove. You can also delete several users at once by selecting the checkbox in front of the appropriate users and clicking the Delete button at the bottom of the User Maintenance widget. To disable a user, select Disable from the Actions menu dropdown. This will prevent the user from being able to log into the system. To enable a disabled user, modify the user and uncheck the Disable User button, then click Update. Our final topic for this video is copying an existing user to create a new user. This is very helpful when a new user will have the same or similar permissions as a current user. Identify the user that most closely matches the permissions for the new user. Click on the Actions menu dropdown and select Copy User. The Define User page will appear. Enter the unique user information such as user ID and username for the new user. Modify permissions as needed by performing the steps that we reviewed earlier. You can see which user we copied in the Existing User field. Once all the permissions are correct, click the Add User button. Thanks for watching this video, where we have reviewed how to add and manage users and their permissions.